So have you ever had one of those dreams where you're supposed to give a speech at school or preach maybe, and you find that you're naked or in your underwear and you don't know what to do about it and there's nothing to do? Or maybe you're in public somewhere, like a store, and you suddenly realize you don't have clothes on and you don't know how to resolve the issue. It feels very vulnerable. Now, this part of the parable of the sheep and the goats, I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in, naked and you clothed me. Maybe feels less common of an issue for most of us, or maybe less relatable. As we all have clothes, here we are. And all the people we know probably have clothes too. Maybe not the designer clothes that we all hope for, but something they can wear, not at risk of being naked with no alternative. Might be lacking clothing to protect them from the elements, though. Think about last week's cold. How many of you were out there and thinking, oh, I wish I had a hat, or I wish I had another layer on, or better boots? So you can relate to that feeling of being exposed and needing something different than what you have. And of course, in this world, there are people who lack proper clothing. Things to keep them warm and dry and protected from the elements. Or appropriate clothing. Maybe they're trying to find a job and they can't afford nice clothes, so trying to go to an interview to get a job, but they don't have a suit, they don't have anything that they can wear that feels appropriate for that moment. So all of us can probably relate to wearing clothes that we didn't feel good in, or feel like it wasn't flattering for us, or maybe we're overdressed on an occasion where everyone else is more relaxed, and here we are wearing something very formal. Or maybe our clothes are a bit tattered or stained and we feel embarrassed about that because everyone else is dressed up differently than that. Or maybe you can relate to a big event coming up and you're planning ahead, like maybe your child's getting married or you're getting married and you think, what am I going to wear? I've got to get a new suit. I haven't bought a suit in 30 years. What am I going to do? Or a party, and you're going to a party and you're wondering if you're going to look okay. Will you fit in? Our clothing can have a big impact on how we feel about ourselves. And a way that people can humiliate other people is to remove their clothing and expose them. I don't know how many of you remember high school pranks, but there were boys that would sneak up behind other boys and pull down their pants, right? Hope that still doesn't happen, but that's the kind of thing that happened when I was in school, to humiliate them. So they're standing there in their underwear, hopefully. Or maybe something fell off by accident, or you're walking around and you didn't notice that your zipper was undone. These kinds of things, we can feel exposed and vulnerable. We feel embarrassed and want to hide somewhere. So you can kind of relate to that feeling of nakedness in that sense, where clothing and dignity are closely related to one another. So a way of stripping people of their clothes is a way of stripping people of their dignity. The Nazis did that to the Jews in the concentration camps. They would leave them without any clothing. And so not only the horrible conditions, but they had to be naked as well. Or in Romans, when they crucified people, they would strip them of their clothing and they would hang them up there on the cross, all exposed. Same thing happened when Jesus was crucified. They took his clothes from him. The story of the Good Samaritan last week, it says, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among 3 thieves who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. So notice that even in that story, that's the first thing that's talked about, that stripping of clothing from him. So in the Noah story, where Noah planted this vineyard and made some wine and got drunk from it, no one took his clothes, but he drank too much and he took off his own clothes. But the shame of that is implied in the story of Noah, where Ham sees his father and tells his brother what had happened, that this is a bad thing. He wants to point out his father's mistake and expose his fault. Now, nakedness has a couple of meanings in the word. First, we may think of it as innocence, right? Nakedness can symbolize innocence. Like Adam and Eve, who symbolized the people of the earliest church, were in the garden and they were naked and they were unashamed by that. They were not ashamed because of their nakedness. Or little children are not embarrassed to run around naked. They think nothing of it. But as they get older, they start to feel embarrassed by that and want to be covered up. So Adam and Eve, after they disobeyed the Lord and ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they became aware of their nakedness, it says, and then they hid from the Lord because of that. Becoming aware of their nakedness, they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves. And what the heavenly doctrines say about that is that they were filled with shame. So it pictures that those people, because they disobeyed the Lord, they were filled with shame because of that. So you can see the loss of innocence that's pictured by being exposed in this case. So when we do something wrong, we can feel that loss of innocence in ourselves. We can feel that shame within ourselves. Which brings us to the other meaning that we're taught, that nakedness symbolizes a state of being spiritually uncovered or vulnerable. It represents a lack of protection or an absence of truth and goodness that covers us and clothes us, clothes our soul, clothes our spirit. So to be naked spiritually is to be exposed to the harmful influences of falsity and worldly temptation without the clothing of divine truth that can protect us from harm, from spiritual harm. So of course, clothing then, what it provides us with is, in this case, represents protection and dignity and truth. So we can see why the act of taking your coat off of your back and giving it to someone else is such a profound act, because it's giving someone something they don't have to protect them, to provide them with something important. But spiritually speaking, we can see the connection. Providing someone with clothing would be helping someone who's feeling vulnerable or ashamed or afraid to feel comforted and strengthened, maybe offering them words of support or giving them truth that can help them or providing them with comfort in some way. What angels try to do is to help us, provide us with clothing, so to speak, with truths that we can use to give us hope and understanding and protection from harm. And evil spirits do the opposite thing. They try to remove from us the truths that we know, remove that protection that we have, those garments of truth. They strip us of the awareness of the Lord's presence, the awareness of love, the awareness of the truths that we do know. One of the temptations we're told we experience is that the evil spirits can flood our minds with false thinking, and it sort of creates a smokescreen, as I like to think of it. So we can't remember the truths we know. We can't see clearly what we're looking for, have the clarity or confidence to do the right thing. So what are examples of that? Well, our thoughts and our feelings are from ourselves. The evil spirits want us to believe that all of the thoughts and the feelings that we have, we generate. They're from us. So if we believe that all evil and falsity is from ourselves, it hurts us because we start to make it, we say, oh, it's mine, and we don't discard it because we take ownership of it. Or if we have a good impulse or a good or a true thought, and we take credit for it and say, that was a great thought. You're so smart, Dave. Good idea. Then that ruins it as well. So that's the other thing that they try to do, is just trick us into thinking the wrong thing. And if we believe it, it can hurt us spiritually. Because it's hard to fight against something that you feel like, well, that's me. How am I going to fight against that? That's just the way I am. I thought of it. It was my idea. It was my impulse. We are a vessel that receives everything from the Lord. And we receive evil thoughts, false thoughts from hell. We receive good and true things from the angels with us. And we have to recognize where those things are coming from. Another thing evil spirits might try to do is strip us of the truth that the Lord forgives us, that the Lord loves us and is incapable of rejecting us or turning his face away from us and frowning upon us. How many of you would say that at some point in your life, the hells have got you to believe that the Lord doesn't forgive you, that the Lord is angry with you, the Lord has turned his face away from you, that you need to do something to get his forgiveness? I think we probably all have had those moments, but that's not how it works. It's not true. And if we can believe that, that leaves us naked and exposed to giving up and just feeling unworthy of love, losing our inspiration to try because we're not salvable, because we believe what the evil spirits have said. But the writings say the Lord's love is unbelievable in the extreme. Like, we couldn't possibly believe how much the Lord loves us. So the difference between having the truth, having these garments, makes a huge difference, just like clothing makes a huge difference to us. So how can we help clothe those who are naked, to take this story at its face value? How do we help clothe those who are naked? When you think about the 12-step program, they do a great job of that, I think. There's the assumption and the understanding that anyone who comes to a meeting, for example, Though they're involved in destructive behavior, that they recognize that that's not where they want to be. They want to change. They realize that they want to be different. So they accept them as they are. They treat them with kindness and compassion, and accepting that no one's perfect, everyone makes mistakes, and that the Lord is with them too, or God, as they understand them, is with them too. And the Lord won't permit mistakes in people's lives so that we can wake up and move forward. It's all part of the journey. And they use clothing, so to speak, or truths to help people show up to get into recovery. You get a sponsor who can talk to you and help you and support you. You can go to a group almost any time of day, any day of the week, and show up and hear people's story, hear truths told from the big book that Bill Wilson wrote that are grounded in truths of repentance. But the goal of all of that, no matter what you're struggling with, is to help other people find solutions to their struggles, ways to clothe themselves so they can go forward in life protected and able to move forward. The story of Noah's drunkenness is a good example to help us remember what we can do, because Noah makes a mistake, right? He's stripped of his clothing because he is drunk. So we can get intoxicated by our own ways of thinking, can't we? We get so stuck in what we think is right, regardless of what anyone else thinks or what is actually true. No, this is how I am. We get so absorbed in thinking something, it strips us our ability to see our way out of it. Can you imagine someone who has a habit of looking at pornography, for example? They get so drawn in that it strips them of the truth that they know about how destructive that can be to their perspective, to their relationship with their partner, to their view of reality, of their healthy relationship with sexuality. It just confuses the thinking, strips them of the truths that they might know about what they're looking for. Or in this climate that we're in, we can see how intoxicated people can become, how we can become by our own view of politics, right? Who's on the right side, who's on the wrong side in our mind, and all the evidence that we see supports what we believe, and it's stripping of us of our ability to see others that have different beliefs as human or intelligent. We're not able to keep those clothes of rationality on and practice them. Truths that I like, we are to love our neighbor. We are to look for the good in them. We're all parts of the Lord's kingdom. All the variety that we see in different people is part of what makes the human experience perfect. Heaven is made up of a variety of people, and that variety causes it to be more and more perfect. So the passages from the writings that open up the meaning of this story about Noah talk about how angels view other people. It says they notice the goods. If they see evils, they excuse them. They hardly notice the evil in another, but instead notice all the goods and truths that are his or hers. On their evils and falsities, they place a good interpretation. How many of us would say, yep, that defines how I do it, right? It's a great thing, a great aspirational way to try to look at people, but it's hard for us to not judge. It's hard for us to look past people's faults, excuse them even, and look for what's good and draw that out. And it says also in that story, they strive with that person as far as possible to correct them. And I think that phrase is tricky if you think about that. So they strive with that person as far as possible to correct them. And again, it takes this garment is on the shoulders because it takes all of our power to do that well. It's so hard not to step into someone's life and cross a boundary about trying to help them, thinking you're being helpful, but really you're intruding or you're overstepping in some way. How do we offer to help in a humble way that can maybe support somebody else? How can we work together to do that? Walking backwards, not focusing on the faults, but looking for what's good. How do we put a good interpretation on what's happening? This is something I try to practice when driving, when people drive, in my judgment, poorly. It's like, well, they must be in a hurry, or is someone sick at home, or you just interpret it in a way that is more favorable than what automatically comes to mind and heart, right? How do we do that? How do we interpret it differently? There's another story I want to highlight, which is referred to as a woman caught in adultery. Caught in the very act, in a very vulnerable state, obviously. And you might ask, well, what about the man in the story? Why isn't he brought forward? Why is it focusing on the woman? Well, maybe he was being dealt with somewhere else. We don't know. I like to think that maybe the woman is focused on because she was able to be impacted by the Lord and be changed by what he was going to do in the situation. So here she is brought before the Lord with these people with stones ready to stone her because she was caught doing this thing that was wrong, of course, according to the law. And they wanted to stone her, and they say, well, Moses said we should stone her, but what do you say? And so there they are accusing her and condemning her, and the Lord is just writing on the ground as if not paying attention. It's a wonderful image of, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to pay attention to that. But he said something very wise. He said, he who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. Then from oldest to youngest, they departed till she was left alone with Jesus there. What a wonderful picture, too, of being convicted by conscience and recognizing, yeah, I don't have the right to do this. And then he said, woman, where are those accusers of yours? She said, I don't know. He said, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. There is the Lord walking backwards, putting the garment on her, offering something constructive. Go and sin no more. I don't condemn you. It's a beautiful image of this being played out. Another story of the demon-possessed man stuck out to me because it said, he was demon-possessed, but also said he wore no clothes. That's a striking part of the story to me. So here he is, demon-possessed, not living in a house. He's living outside, and he had no clothes on. And it's an example of how when the hells attack us, we fall prey to their influencing, can leave us feeling exposed and ashamed and unable to break away from their influence. The truth can't penetrate. It can't have an impact. But the Lord can provide the truth from his word to help in the situation. The truths of repentance that can help us get our lives turned around and changed. So we can encourage people to go to the Lord, find a way to get out of that situation that they're in. If people are struggling, offer them community, offer them encouragement, offer them non-judgment and compassion and understanding. Maybe we can be that person that they can be accountable to if they need support. How often have we fallen and needed help getting back up? But in this story, after the man has this interaction with Jesus and he casts out the demons, it says he was clothed and in his right mind. Something shifts in the story where he is now clothed. And that's because there's truths now that he can use to change his life. And that's what the Lord provided him with. Remove those falsities that were flooding his mind and making it impossible for him to live well. So I would suggest that we are all naked from time to time in our spiritual life. Times when we have made mistakes, when we feel ashamed and vulnerable and want to hide. I invite us all to remember what that feels like and use that as fuel in our interactions with others who may have fallen into a state where they have made a mistake, where they made a bad choice, where they've sinned against the Lord. I was naked and you clothed me. When did you see me naked and clothe you? When you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. All of this is part of working towards keeping these two great commandments: to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. Amen. We bow our heads for a moment. Lord, thank you for how much you love each person that you've created, how much you love each of us, how much you understand when we make mistakes, and how much compassion you have for us. And you never turn your face away or frown at us, as you're always looking at us with love and compassion and mercy. And you're also inviting us to go and sin no more, to turn our lives around. Lord, may we use this same compassion and love and mercy towards others in our life, that we may clothe those who are naked. Be with each of us, Lord, giving us strength in this endeavor.